Let's kick this off. Welcome to the QA Roundtable at Fanfest 2018. We have a couple questions that we fielded, and one of them, by means of being really convenient for us, is going to let us introduce ourselves as well. So we're going to start with that. This question was from Dwarven Rage, who asks, do you embed a quality analyst with each team, or do you have the QA team rack and stack each sprint and the team mulls through combined lists of issues or builds? So that's answerable. We do embed QAs with each team. Some teams have more than one QA. Some teams have 4. Some teams have none on occasion, but we try to limit that as much as possible. I'm CCP Antiquarian. I am the senior QA analyst for Team Tri-Lambda. We handle audio and graphics issues. And we're going to go down the line here, and you're going to be introduced to everybody else. Gentlemen.
I'm CCP DaFunk. I am a regular QA on the audio and graphics team. Because there are multiple of us and we split the work. There are 4 of us in total, which is why 2 of us are off at the office now testing.
So yeah, I'm CCP Habakuk. I'm senior QA analyst together with CCP Lebowski on Team 5.0. So structures, etc. And everything else.
I'm CCP Goliath, QA director for EVE Online. I also serve from time to time on Team McTeamface with our technical director, CCP Tuxford. As you might imagine, we do dangerous and unprofessional things.
I'm CCP Sledgehammer. I was formerly on Tri-Lambda with those guys, but I transitioned last year onto the live events team. I'm just a run-of-the-mill QA.
CCP Claymore. I'm currently on Size Masters and Psycho Sisters, so we're working on the PI stuff and some of the Dead Space stuff we saw yesterday.
I'm CCP Maxwell. I'm a test engineer, QA engineer, the QA engineer, and I'm with Team R&B. And our rep sheet includes the launcher and chat.
Yeah, as Habakuk said, I'm Lebowski. I'm the other QA on Team 5.0. So.
I'm CCP Deadlift. I'm working on Psycho Sisters and sort of still a little bit on Size Matters, but Psycho Sisters is my main one, and PI and Activity Tracker is the kind of stuff we're working on.
And in addition to the gentlemen you see here, there's a few QAs, as was mentioned, that, there's one.
Hi, I'm Krillin. I work on Team Genesis with the NPE team. Sorry, CCP TurtlePower. Thank you.
And yet there are more. Draconis isn't here, and Savior isn't here. Is that it?
Paradox.
And Paradox, who is feeling unwell, apparently. So those 3 QAs not here right now. Also, we have an outsourcer who work out of Glasgow, and they do regressions. 2-week full regressions of all of our core features every time we put something out. And then we have the bug hunters, who may or may not be in attendance in the room right now. Bug hunters, ISD, raise your hands. Say hello. These guys provide, I can't even begin to offer a description of how much assistance. It's just a real joy to work with, mostly. Anything you guys want to add about our setup, or
no? I think we can move on.
Any questions from the field so far? Anybody looking around? What do you got?
So when you file a bug report in the game, does that go to this team or a different team? How do they see what we see?
Section 3. Yeah. We'll be getting to that. Let's just jump into section 2 before we take any questions.
So we have a question from the gentleman over there in the hat, Chitlin Soul Food, who asks, dev versus staging versus production. What kind of differences are there? Question mark. Is CC basically a staging environment or an almost production last step before final TQ deploy? Question mark. I imagine it's pretty complex given the single shard setup. Is that what Hareka? Words. You did the work. So, anybody want to tackle this directly?
Yes, it is complex. Thank you very much for the question. So essentially, we have obviously our public test environment, Singularity, Duality are likely familiar to you. We also have many internal test environments that start with our development server, our mainline branch, Chaos. That's where all of our sort of bleeding edge dev work tends to sit until it gets staged into one of our former Hurricanes, now interesting Nordic names. Staging branches, that is the branch that will go to Singularity. It will contain whatever features are penned in for the upcoming release on the 4 or 5 weekly release cadence that we have right now. And then obviously we have TQ, the branch that you all know, and then we also have our Serenity branch, Sieve Serenity, for China. We tend not to focus so much on the Serenity side. We're basically just TQ and CC Chaos are where we live, and we have the other internal servers for things like upgrade tests, data migrations, like type ID changes, things like that that we run through. That's a pretty reasonable rundown.
Yeah, and I think Habakuk has a follow-up.
Well, actually, that's Habakuk's going to jump in on the Singularity thing. So I'll just speak a smidge more about Singularity. We have CC and the use for CC very firmly embedded in our minds as somewhere where we put features that will receive testing so that we can discover defects. We can see all the myriad of interesting ways that EVE players use and abuse the features that we put on there. And from our perspective, we know that you have a slightly different use case for CC, where you can go on and take advantage of the fantastic 100-esque market seeding to fly some pretty bananas ships that you might not be so willing to lose on TQ. With that in mind, we obviously have some rules around the test server use and some tools that we put in your hands to amp your ability to test. For instance, the Move Me bot, or the ability to copy your ships or your skills from your mains on TQ into the test environment to make sure that you're up to date. These rules are right now under discussion, and we've posted in the forum recently that we're proposing some changes, and so Habakuk will speak to that a little now, the changes that we've got in mind.
Yeah, so as Singularity is changing, our demands are changing, and also features are changing, like in a few weeks or 2 months or whatever, outposts are going away, which is changing also how Singularity will look like a bit. So we have decided to adapt our rules a bit and our support for testing on Singularity. So I've posted a proposal 3 days ago on the test server forum, which is mostly to replace the main station in the combat system with upwell structures, as we have now, upwell structures which provide basically all needs which we have for getting your ships, fitting your ships, making sure that you have the clone correctly set, etc. And together with this, we will also remove the rule. Well, very likely, it is all up to discussion, but we will very likely remove the rule against combat at a station in 6-C, and probably a few other small rule changes, probably also removing the rule against combat at the gates, as it's probably not needed. There's already a bit of discussion on the test server forums, and one of the other changes would also be to move the the main combat system to a soft system, and then we can also take advantage of the soft features, can take advantage of building super capitals in the same system with a bit of support from us, with support from the market seeding. And some other of the potential changes are, or more questions are, what shall we do with the /copy ships command, as this is currently hard-coded to the current station, and we are aware that some of our Singularity players abuse it quite a bit. So,
Rainy, if you're here, show yourselves.
It's actually not a bad idea. Can we get a show of hands of how many people actually use Singularity? Get on there, hang out.
Okay.
And
how many of you are more than once per week on Singularity? Okay.
Fewer hands.
That's a bit fewer, yeah.
And any general discussion, comments, or questions about the rules that Habakuk is going over?
Yeah, CC is currently used for Alliance tournament practice, so please do not screw it up even more than lately.
I would like to rebut. It is used for Alliance tournament practice. That is not one of the use cases of Singularity. It's not something that we support, and that is why the Thunderdome server was created, so that we could not disrupt you with our frequent remirroring and such. Thunderdome's currently being brought back up to code, and yeah, we should see a return to the old Alliance tournament practice on Thunderdome ASAP.
There is work going into that now. I think Bartender has been putting some time.
Yeah, myself, Bartender, and Shreddy, have been working with Thunderdome.
Thing as well.
Yes.
It is indeed, yeah.
So you just said Bartender, yourself, and Shreddy are trying to bring back Thunderdome?
No, Bartender, Shreddy, and I have been working with Thunderdome to get it operational again. Yeah. Yours was too evocative. That was too definite. Create an atmosphere of that.
Comments?
So yeah, anything regarding Singularity rules and support or whatever, or suggestions?
Yes. Will you in future make it easier for Supercat pilots to get their hands on big tools on the test server? Right now we need to claim strap into some place, build some TO and build it from the bottom, because there is no supers on the market, and it's a pain in the ass for us that try to train in it.
Yeah. With this plan, it would get easier, as we will anchor Sotillo, and we will have sovereignty, so you can use this one Sotillo for building super capitals.
Yeah. But you're not thinking about going that whole stretch and say put them on the market.
No, there's currently no plan to put the super capitals directly on the market.
Fine.
But it will get a bit easier for building them.
Yeah, thank you.
I would have a question about that on the market. How do you actually decide which items to put on the market? Because sometimes you have like this, why is this one module right now not on the market, and which is are you scrapping the kill boards about the most models, or what is the...
So at the moment it's basically all regular up to Tech 2 items. Currently all faction items etc. are excluded. I think faction ammo is included, and faction ships. And otherwise, super capitals are excluded, but all regular items should all be seeded, except very new items are sometimes missing. They are then normally being seeded as soon as we want public feedback on them.
There's one outlier to that, which is polarized weapons. The way that we filter out and seed the market is done by meta level at the moment, and polarized weapons are a bit of an outlier in their meta level, so that's why they aren't currently being seeded by virtue of the script.
Yeah, I just found it when I was trying to scan down some sites that there are like some of the scanning stuff, like soils and stuff you use normally as faction version, and that was not there.
Yeah, faction versions are currently not included.
There's some discussion about whether or not we can move in that direction now.
Yeah, and I'd welcome feedback in the forum thread on that. Opinions, particularly abuse cases, etc. When we've done limited seeding of faction, dead space, and officer modules before, along with things like super capitals, the test server has become a very unfriendly place, and people tend to get really turned off from using it because it attracts kind of like blobby, very aggressive behavior, and we definitely see a rise in acrimony when that presents itself. So we're really trying to avoid that, like maintain the sanctity of the environment as a good place for people to go and do stuff, while obviously giving you guys as much as we possibly can.
Can we go to the back corner?
Sorry. How are you planning to implement the changes with Abyss? So if I'm having now a Tech 2 model and I'm changing it to a better property set, will this be reflected on Serenity?
You're referring to the mutators? The mutoplasmids that were discussed, or I'm sorry? Yeah. So that's obviously a system that's still under construction. We haven't managed to legislate anything to do with the test server at this time. At the time that those are scheduled to go to CC, we'll work it out. But right now we aren't there yet.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry about that.
So in relation to that, it's not unheard of for capital to have dead space thing. Are you going to see dead space modules or faction modules together with the mutant-based stuff to test those effects out?
So essentially, testing the expansion is probably going to challenge some existing CC paradigms, and we may do that in short, concentrated bursts rather than just have it be always the case. So yeah, we could do, for instance, like a week, 2 weeks where we put on everything, and then if we were planning, for instance, a re-mirroring, we could do that in the lead up to the mirror, and then wipe everything, go back to normal, something like that. But as I say, very much under discussion.
We sometimes use the redeeming system for specific cases, like when we changed capital ships and fighters. We use a redeeming system, we get everybody like Titans and stuff like that. We may do something similar depending on our own needs, what we want tested. Or if, for example, we really wanted to test micro warp drives and the mutators, we might give everybody that out through the redeeming system.
CCP Paradox, everyone.
Paradox, do you want to tell people who you work with and what you do?
Team Phenomenon.
Okay.
So Abyssal Dead Space.
Any other questions regarding the test servers? No? Then we'll move right along.
When testing out the wormhole features, I also would be with the abyssal dead space stuff and like that would be a good thing to up the spawn rate of these features, because when now other persons are traveling through wormholes, you don't get so many of them, so it's quite hard to test stuff like that. And the same would be with that you just up the spawn rate of all the events and all the stuff, so it is easier to find stuff to test out.
So I'm going to pick on you a little bit here, and I apologise. For what it's worth, I think it's a marvellous question. But so this is something that we encounter quite often, where I guess there's no kinder way to put it than a lot of people that use CC think that they really understand how Eve works, and I'm sure that you have very good grounds for thinking that it behaves the way it does, because human beings are fantastic at observing patterns, putting two and two together to make 4, but in this case, potentially making 5. That there's a few wrinkles in content testing on CC, but I think when it comes to wormholes, there's this perception that there's an artificially low spawn rate. We don't use a different distribution on CC than we do in TQ. It's a case of behaviors. So with people not migrating through wormholes and such, they don't behave as you might expect them to. The MoveMe system is quite flexible. For instance, if any of you have used it on Thunderdome, you'll see that it's a massive list of systems on there. So if the need arises that we needed more people in wormhole space, we could definitely put an array of wormholes in. I think Thera is in there now though, right? Yeah, so that's a good place to start and just kind of spaghetti through the chain. Yeah.
I think that would be an approach we would take rather than changing spawns, right? Just for more wormhole systems.
Yeah, although that being said, I have flirted with the idea of having a content system or constellation that just has everything spawning like continually. The problem is that then jeopardizes the sanctity of the test environment, right? Because if we're coding special distributions for CC, then we're not testing the distribution we're going to use on TQ. So then when we go to TQ, nothing gets distributed, and everyone gets super mad and goes, "Why didn't you test it on CC?" Well, we did. We just didn't test that exact thing, and that's a difficult argument to make, right? Section 3?
Section 3 it is, and at this point we'll probably be addressing your question. The brunt of Section 3 is about bug reporting and how that happens and what we get from it. Let me bring this up. First though, I guess, Goliath, you want to talk some more?
Yeah, I shouldn't have just done a diatribe there because I'm about to another one. And I feel like the impact's going to be less, but okay.
If you want, I can read through the list instead if you need a break.
No,
no? Okay.
I can do it. I can't sign and speak though, so I'm going to pass this on for now, and I'll get it at the end. That is beautiful, by the way.
All right. So what we have here is a list of general good bug reporting tips. Just if you have an issue that you detect either on Singularity or on TQ, and you want it to get attention, there are some kind of helpful guidelines that you can follow that maybe aren't necessarily clear immediately from the F12 menu. And Goliath is going to go.
6 very simple do's or don'ts. Number 1, don't tell us that something is broken. Broken means nothing. Broken, borked, etc. They don't give you any context or information. So it's important to make sure that you're conveying as much information as possible in as few words as possible when you do bug reporting. So using generic terms like broken, borked, insert expletive here. Just remember that was being recorded. Superb. Number 2, don't report bugs on behalf of someone else. The bug reporting system is not a voting system, no matter what social media may tell you. We need your data from the bug that you experienced. This is also why we prefer you to report bugs from in the client rather than the website, if at all possible. And particularly right after you experience the bug or shortly thereafter, rather than just indiscriminately some hours later. The logs that we harvest from your client are really the key info there. Things like your character, your user, some information about your session, your ship fitting. All of these things are automatically harvested when you report from the client. When you report on the website, you have to do a lot of manual attachments. Sometimes people do that very well. Sometimes people don't bother so much, and that tends to be when we have to close reports as incomplete or bounce it back to you for questions. Do report bugs that you find in the test environments. I'm a pretty avid reader of, a lot of EVE social portals, and there's definitely a perception out there that reporting bugs on CC is just something that we sort of take in and then go like, we'll get to later. We tend to process 100% or 99% of bug reports that were submitted on Singularity before that release hits TQ. The bug report could be attached to an existing defect if we're aware of it. We might reproduce it and find a new defect from the report. All sorts of things could happen. If we raise a defect from it, that doesn't then follow necessarily that the fix will be in and tested prior to us releasing on TQ, which is where I think this perception comes from. I reported that on CC a week ago, I reported that on CC a month ago, and yet somehow it went to the server. What are they doing? Fixing and defect discovery are two very distinct things that we shouldn't conflate in our minds. Number 4, don't attach screenshots that don't show what your issue is. I think because the bug reporting tool recommends that you attach a screenshot, if you haven't, then we get a lot of nice pictures of people's hangars and whatever they're flying at the time, or usually some chat channels open, sometimes with some rather illuminating information in them. QA, the bug reporting tool is broken, or whatever, right? Yeah. The screenshot tool is fantastic. It's got arrows. You can annotate it with text. You can do all sorts of different colorations and stuff. But do only use it when it's applicable. Otherwise, we'll spend time looking for the problem in a screenshot when actually it's just a screenshot of a perfectly functioning hangar. Do reference your bug report numbers, your EBR numbers, when you're in communication with any of us about issues that you've reported. If you don't have an EBR number, you didn't file a bug report. You probably filed a support ticket, or maybe you just shitposted on Reddit. Okay, thank you. I love RE, by the way. I'm a pretty frequent poster, but there is definitely a trend to talk about how many bug reports you filed. I've heard people say that they've bug reported something like 50 times. It just definitely didn't happen. There was quite a stymied and interesting discussion a few weeks back where a user was very loudly proclaiming that they had bug reported issues several times on various different characters. It turned out that every single one of those reports had been a support ticket. Roughly 80, I believe. And, so that makes the conversation that we have to have in public in front of everyone else with that person look very strange. It looks like we don't have the info because they're being very insistent and everyone else is kind of getting their back, so to speak, because they have their own anecdotal evidence. But yeah, your EBR numbers are available on the website, the community website, under My Bug Reports, and they're also presented to you when you submit a reporting client. It can be very handy, just keep a note of that. Now, I don't want any of this to sound like I am championing our bug reporting system as a fantastic, well-working system. It has a lot of shortcomings, the most notable of which is the two-way communication is very difficult. Through our system. You do not get notified when we comment on your issue. We do get notified when you comment on your issue if we've already processed it, but before that we don't. This is just to be frank, tragic limitation, and something that we really would like to change, but that requires a few different developer teams to have time to do that and commit to it, and it tends to kind of get bumped down in priority a fair bit because the tool ultimately works. It does work. People do file a lot of bug reports. So just before I move on to some rough stats, I want to explain the reason why I'm announcing stats. The final don't. Don't confuse support tickets and bug reports. If you need reimbursement, if you need action taken, if you're stuck, if you cannot pay, if you just paid but got nothing in return, we can't help you in the bug reporting queue. I'm so sorry, but we just can't. We have had, since the start of the year, roughly, we've had about, and everyone just chill out because this number is going to get a lot more context shortly, 6,500 bug reports submitted since the start of the year, roughly. We've processed around 4,800 of them, or around 75% of them. On CC bug reports, as I say earlier, that's close to 100%. Now, of those reports, we have 1,963 attached to open defects or have become defects themselves. That's 30% of all of the bug reports submitted since the start of the year. They are the value that we get, 1 in 3. 2,859 reports closed. Closed is something that happens when either the bug is by design, you've submitted a feature request, in which case we'll direct you to the forums, or invariably you've submitted a support ticket request, and we have no way of putting that in the customer support queue for you. So all we can do is just reply back and ask you politely to submit a support ticket. Of the reports closed, 2,859, 44% of all submitted reports. Of them, 37% of those are support tickets. So 1,073 reports should have been support tickets, and that's 16% of the total submission. We actually made some changes in the bug reporting tool late last year. Yeah. To try and make it more obvious, the distinction between a bug report and a support ticket, and that does not seem to have had the impact we were hoping for. So we'll probably have to, in fact, if anything, more support tickets are coming in now.
A little bit. Last time I checked, a little bit.
I presume the correct thing to do then, if you lose your ship due to a bug, is you bug report it, then support ticket with the EBR number.
Fantastic, yes. Oh, yeah. I mean, if you want to reference those two together, that is superb. Really, really helpful for our customer support department who do have access to the bug reporting queue and can reference that.
It helps though if you're. I think if you're doing that in the bug report, don't emphasize that the loss of the ship is the problem, because it's usually like it's a symptom. It's a thing that happened as a result of the bug.
Because of X, Y, Z. I was doing A, B, C.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you do both, please mention in the bug report that you also send a support ticket, as then we don't need to reference this again, and this makes our life also a bit easier.
Yeah, the best way to think about it is that the support ticket will help you get your problem solved, but the bug report will help it make sure it doesn't happen to the next guy. Like,
very nice. Yeah, very nice.
Yeah, or to you again. Yeah.
So you lose your ship or something to a bug. File the bug report first about the bug itself, and then file a support ticket referencing the bug report number.
Yep, that works. Either way works. And if you want your ship back, then customer support will be able to help you with that. So the support ticket's
Yeah, diatribe over. Thank you very much.
So then moving on, how your reports actually get dealt with by us is a concern, and teams sort of take a different tack on this, I find. And I'll speak for Trilanda first, and then we'll just kind of go around, unless there's major objections to that. So we have our own bespoke filter that goes through and looks at all of the bug reports that are active, open, that haven't been processed yet, and it looks specifically for things in the category of audio and graphics. We frequently get other defects in there, technical ones, or bugs rather, that are for us. And so I have a few additional filters on top of that I use to kind of trawl through the bug database, and basically kicks out a list, and the 4 QAs that we have periodically tackle that list. And especially when we put something out new, so on deployment day, or when a new build goes onto the test server, we pay special attention. There's a couple bugs in our list, I would say maybe 20%, that we know that they're an issue, and they're just really hard to reproduce, and we can't turn them into a defect because we don't have a reproduction for them, but we know that it's there, and they just kind of sit at the bottom of the list, which isn't great. But usually it's maybe once every 3 months we go all the way through and then take time, because that's the real issue for us, is that processing bug reports and turning them into defects or isolating the issues. If we don't have, say we have the bug report from you, but it doesn't have all of the information attached to it, it becomes very difficult for us to track it down, and it takes a lot of time to do that. So that's why that doesn't happen maybe as rapidly as it could. I don't know if you want to throw in on this as well, because you're...
I mean, I guess I'd just say that, like, obviously, in audio and graphics, we live a charmed life. We have less bugs per head than the rest of the department.
Yeah.
But some of the bugs we do get will be things like, my ship just suddenly looks wrong, I don't know what happened, I don't know why. And that's obviously very difficult to reproduce and stuff like that. So the volume of bugs can be a real help, because then you can start to see patterns, especially if you have logs and screenshots. For example, there was a bug a while ago with multiple ships appearing in the hangar at the same time. And yeah, that was the whole thing. When one bug report came in, we just didn't know what to do. But I think by the time we reached about 6 or 7, we were able to start detecting some patterns and behaviour across and like notice various things in the log.
Yeah,
start to like show things. It's amazing.
Especially good for us is when we have the IGBR package, zip file, it has your settings in it. And because audio and graphics is really heavily client dependent, almost all of our bugs when they come in, the other guys will talk about server-side stuff or things where they're looking at the database. But for us, it's usually happening on your machine. So having logs from your machine and having the settings for your client that experience the bug is super helpful. But that's how we really interface with the bugs. That's how they come to us. They come to us directly, and we deal with them like right there. And then occasionally we'll get something from one of the other guys, because you'll say, this is a gameplay bug, all of the textures are wrong. And that's not really a gameplay bug, and so they'll send it over to us.
Only other thing for us, I would say, is, update your drivers.
Oh,
your
God.
drivers are probably out of date. Go home and update them.
Yeah, that's usually how your bug reports get. It's that you didn't have to hear your drivers. That's not true. Let's go down.
You guys get the funner bugs as well. You get backwards Tengu and like golden retriever. Yeah, they're amazing bugs.
Did you get the catalyst bug ever?
No, I
The
didn't.
radar dish stays perfectly still. Because it's awesome.
Don't edit it out, I like it.
Do you want to take a general view?
Well, my general view, I tend, rather than processing a lot of individual reports, I tend to look at trends. One way I do that is we have a word cloud generator for the reports, and after we release anything substantial, usually after each monthly release, I'll do like 5 days of capture of the most common terms in reports. Would anyone like to take a stab at what marches might have featured? Local was quite large. Yeah, it almost pushed all of the other words out of the cloud. We filter out broken, borked, and certain expletives, but not others. That can be an interesting trend. Trends and aggregation, just like it helps us see where we're going. It makes sure that we're using our team as best we can. Obviously, we only have so many hours in the day, and Eve is a non-trivial product to test, especially for a team of just 14. We tend not to spend tons of time on individual reports. So if your report is extremely nested, complex, or very much a single case report, as Antiquarian alluded to, it might take some time before it gets traction. I think we should actually move on for time's sake, since we have quite a meaty topic to cover next, and we only have 20 minutes left, and I wanted to do a large open question session, which is now looking like it's going to happen after the roundtable.
All right.
So let's just go section 3.
So this question is why bug reporting in general.
No.
No.
Section 3,
My bad.
yeah.
What do QA do that isn't testing? I do a lot of streaming. I just show up. What do QA do that isn't testing? Let's get the far end of the table.
Yeah.
I mean Scott. I'm sure. Oh, sorry, Paradise. Doxed.
I can speak to some of it because we do have some other responsibilities. We mentioned the outsourcers. When I'm not testing, I'm actually organizing them. So when they're running the regression, the 2-week regression sprints, I'm making sure that they have access to the servers, they have anything they need. And if they're not in the sprint, I make sure that we're using their time. So we might get one of the guys working on the structures thing will be like, we are putting in a new structure, can we just get some exploratory around it, because they'll be the first new people to see it. So I'll just work up with Poltawin how they'll go about that kind of testing. So it's one of the extra things I have when I'm not testing.
It depends how broad you talk about testing. I mean, other than sitting down and playing with testing features directly, we'll also be planning out future testing that we'll be doing, how that will lay that out, how long that's going to take, what kind of inherent risks there are with the development of the feature, and how that will affect the testing that we're going to be doing. Because we're embedded in the teams, we often have the privilege of being really involved in the whole design and early implementation and prototyping process. So we'll be there from the start, kind of offering like a critical eye on things before they've even reached a coding kind of stage. We'll be kind of championing kind of quality in general within the team, and in relation to our outsourcers, we'll be writing regression scripts for them to be running for features that we're about to release or have recently released in some cases, so that they can continue to make sure that the feature works when we move on to other things. Lots of different things. Do you want to talk about anything?
You just go again. I can maybe add a little bit about what I do other than testing. For R&B, we're a three-man team, and especially the last year or so, my focus, besides testing, has been a lot on keeping the AWS infrastructure for chat up and running on the test environments, stuff like that, DBs, EC2 instances, plumbing that together and keeping that running. So that's been interesting.
I mean, kind of similarly to that, because I'm very much focused on live events with Team Event Horizon, we've been having a lot of discussion about how we're going to improve our tooling to better deliver content. So myself and CCP Dragon have quite a few lengthy discussions about all that sort of thing because it affects both of us. And Claymore, Habakuk and myself are the liaisons for the Bug Hunter EK group. Goliath is our stakeholder, so we regularly meet up to discuss the state of the program and how we think it's going.
So now if you might like to touch on the mob programming style that your team did, I think that's quite an interesting route into quality.
Yeah, so we have certain requirements upcoming for how we tie dungeon distributions and seasonal events together. So currently we have to do quite a lot of deploying to get a season into people's hands. So we have to do a deployment to get the dungeons to distribute if the event involves dungeons. We also have to set seasons up with their challenges and their dates in another deployment, or match these two things together. But the point is, it touches a lot of code where we could streamline. So back in January, my team, along with certain members of the more technical departments of EVE's development, got together and we tried what's called mob programming, where we all sat down and before anyone had even touched the keyboard, we did full requirements analysis and dependency map for what we wanted to do. So we basically want to tie the dates of a season to distributing dungeons, so we don't have to deploy on a day to get the content for a season into your hands. So we went through 3-4 different iterations of the system over the course of a week, whereby everyone got a shot at what's called driving and navigating. Navigators basically dictate to the driver what they should code. The driver shouldn't be doing any programming, but they're the ones that are inputting everything into the project. And we found from a very early stage that because everybody was on the same level with regards to the hierarchy of the working group, that we arrived at a very balanced set of requirements and plan, both with regards to implementation and testing of it within a couple of days, which was quite startling. A lot of it was to do with purposely taking ourselves out of the general development floor of EVE, so we weren't being interrupted. We had all of our time for that week booked off as a week-long meeting. But yeah, it's something that I really like to adapt and even apply to triaging defects, for instance, like having the team sit there for a couple of days and going through in the same sort of mob fashion, like fixing all of our crap.
And I also like to really encourage learning often. So things like root cause analysis, retrospection are very important, and the guys really help champion that within the overall dev culture, really making learning and taking lessons and a real big part of what we do.
There are a lot of things we do, but do we want to roll on to...
I think we basically now need to take 2 questions and then call it so that everyone can get to their next round table. We're supposed to finish at like 10 too, right?
For a while. I think you were first.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you're doing a lot of effort for robustness testing, of course, I'm concluding to you when we need to deal with battles of 5,000 pilots and even more. Mm-hmm. And I have a question, if you have a wish when it comes to the mass testing. I think the last mass test was about 2,500 people, I'm not really sure. So are these numbers for you sufficient that you can get all the data to give the analysis data to the developers, or what is the number of pilots you as a want to have on these mass tests?
That depends quite a bit on the topic of the mass test. And currently it's not really feasible to run a mass test with more than 600 players. In the last mass test it was normally quite lower than this. But most of those mass tests were not specific for getting a really large fleet fight.
Okay.
It's more to verify just that the fleet fight itself works, that nothing clearly breaks. But yeah, this depends a lot on the topic of the.
What the player base is bringing to you is sufficient for you currently. So that's the message from your side.
Often yes, but
depends heavily on.
There were some mass tests in.
Last month.
Yeah, there were some mass tests in the last 6 months which were not as good from player participation, but this was partially then also due to internal problems with communication, etc., that we announced the mass test too late, not enough, etc. So yeah.
For try, we want the client to break. We want as many of you there as possible at all times. Like for every single one of our mass tests, if we're in it, we want 1,000 people, or we want so many people that you have to turn your settings off because your fan is on fire.
It's in our interest to be a good partner here, because finally we are playing the game and everything we can do. So just keep us informed if you want more. Just try it out. I think there's plenty of people willing to support you.
Yeah, we will use it.
Yeah, we really appreciate it too.
Yeah. The question at the front, I think.
Just on the retros, can you make is there any plan to make those public so that other people can review the results of the?
So in some cases we have done. Quite often we'll make post-mortems public rather than retrospective. So a retrospective is really a tool that we target more for teams to learn iteration to iteration, sprint to sprint, how they work in and of themselves. They would not be in any way suitable for public consumption. But your more technical in detail post-mortems, I don't know if any of you read Behind the Scenes of a Very Long Downtime, the CC Pizza deal last year. That was that would be a good example of a public post-mortem. We also have some that we wouldn't make public for business reasons, so I wouldn't want to make it a standard. But I certainly enjoy getting as much technical information into people's hands, particularly when there have been problems.
We might have time for one more. Yeah.
Do you have any automated testing tools that you?
And I think that's all that we've got. Jess, no, we will field the question. QA engineer, please.
Well, we have some. Actually, most of the automation that we have currently, I haven't touched in a while because that's been our tech director on Eve. That's been and Goliath that have been championing those into place.
Are they homegrown tools, or are they?
We use a fair amount of frameworks. I
mean, everything that touches Eve basically has to be homegrown in some way. But then we use Team City to run as much of our infrastructure as we can. But
launcher related.
Yeah, launcher. We had platform tests, basically testing on the Windows platform, just to make sure that the launcher would actually start up and could upgrade and stuff like that. But I think that's the gist of it. I mean, there is, of course, we have pretty extensive unit testing suites that we run. We don't have 100% coverage on our code, nowhere near that, but we have coverage. Yeah, well, it doesn't. It's not that guarantees anything either, but there's always that trade-off of we have a client and we want to mimic the user behavior and do that in an automated fashion. Doing that and keeping it robust without having an army of people maintaining that's not easy and maybe not even feasible. So there's a little bit of a balance there. But you have been running like behavior tests
Yeah, I was just about to touch on that actually. Tuxford and I have been making some inroads into behavioural driven development and using the frameworks around that to make some user behaviour tests. We've got some in for the fleet character selection screen, a basic smoke test of moving around in space and taking a gate, and yeah, we're taking a strong look at the market at the moment. We think there's a lot of interesting opportunities there, but the market's a funny one because for each one of the behavior tests, to ensure test sanctity, we have to basically tear down like the entire DB, recreate it from scratch, and then spin up a server, and then spin up a client, and then perform the test. And that's for like three actions, like 4 actions, something like that, every time. The market takes quite a long time to load, and will just sort of delay that test even further. So approaching that is a really interesting problem. Unfortunately, one we don't currently have a solution for, which would be even more interesting, I'm sure. But yeah, infancy, taking it slow. Automation in a legacy product is a challenge, and people much smarter than I have written fantastic texts on the topic. But yeah, we try and make inroads where we can, particularly with newer, outside of monolith, discrete services. They're incredibly testable, flexible. Yeah.
And I mean, DaFunk and myself and our team.
Yeah, DaFunk and myself's definitely your album.
It's coming out. We've been taking some steps towards getting client performance tests automated, so that we just get more regular numbers on how well things are behaving. Because every now and again, you'll just get like a flood of indicators that seem to say that the client is performing poorly or slowing down, but we don't get it regularly enough. So we've been trying to make steps in that regard to get just like the client comes up, we take a frame time number, and then we move into a blank scene, or not blank scene, but a low traffic scene, and we take a performance number. The problem there is that we have so many systems in Eve that are kind of variable that play with that number, that without the volume of numbers giving us a pattern of frame time changes, it's not as valuable. But we have been doing some stuff to try and increase those numbers so that we can see the pattern a little bit easier.
And I think that's us.
Yep. And I think that's us. Thank you all for attending the QA panel. QA panel. Special reminder for those of you who don't log into CC very often, log into CC very often.
Also, I'd just like to say, this is by far a record-breaking attendance for the QA Roundtable. Thank you all so much for coming. This means the world to us.
When they're listed as attached, do they just then stay as attached forevermore?
Forever. Yeah, yeah, unless we like literally deleted the report, it would just be like that forever. Yeah. Although that being said, when we make changes in the future, they might affect